Welcome back to the Lift Free and Diet Hard podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Coates. Join me along with industry leaders and friends on a quest to get more people through the gym door and eating and living healthier. Join me where evidence meets empathy while rejecting fitness industry fads and extremism. Let's begin. Susan Niebergall.
Andrew.
It's wonderful to have you. The author of Fit at Any Age. You're the co-coach of the Inner Circle along with Jordan Syed, who was recently a guest on the podcast. Guys, go look for that as well after you listen to this one. And much to our mutual lament, one of the very few prominent female fitness authorities over the age of 60 in the industry.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. It's so funny. Many years ago, I was telling Jordan this. He remembers our conversation. I said I wanted to be a person that kind of led the way, and lead by example and be kind of someone on the older end of the spectrum because the industry has so many great young people in it. And I am not a young person anymore. But one of my goals was to be able to show that you can do this at any age and make progress and reach your goals and, all the things. So I really appreciate you saying that. It means a lot. It's been a goal of mine to keep kind of being out front, only because of age, not because I'm any better than anybody else, but I'm just because I'm older than everybody else, And
I love that you embrace it, whereas a lot of people would probably, not love to focus on that aspect of it. But again, I think it's a really important thing for us to see because now more than ever, a lot of the people in the industry are grabbing onto themes of longevity, metabolic health as we're getting older, and everything that comes around it. I know that I'll bring him on, a good friend of mine, Robert Linkle. I know that you, if I'm not mistaken, you had his help with your rehabilitation from hip surgery, right? Or hip replacement.
Robert is great. I've had him on my podcast too. He is absolutely the king of training the older adult. I mean, that's the name of his company. And yes, I consulted with him not only because he trains people that have had my age and older who have had hip replacements, but he himself has gone through this. And so he was helping me prepare quite a bit, actually. And I spoke to him. I don't know how close to my surgery it was. It wasn't that far off. And I was talking to him about how I was pushing through pain at like the last 4 or 5 months just to strengthen and stabilize my hip. And I would never recommend anyone do that unless you're in a situation like, well, I'm not going to make anything worse because the joint's going to be gone. I can't screw it up, but it would be worth it on the other side. And he was the one person that just validated all of that. And he said, yes. Suck it up. He told me to suck it up. Whatever pain, I'm a king of sucking it up. So I was great with that. Suck it up for now, because when you get to the other side, your life will be completely different. And he nailed it. And that's exactly what happened.
I'm going to bring him on to talk more about the stuff, but let's dig into this. So you're just about to celebrate 1 year anniversary of the hip replacement. Yep. So bit of context, what led to this? Okay. What happened? And then we can get into how you approached your rehab.
Yeah. Years ago, I just started having pain up in my groin, the hip flexor area. And I started to stretch the hell out of it because that's the sensation. Like it feels tight. Like I needed to stretch that. And we've all felt that in our hip flexors at one point in time and the other. And we all want to do that hip flexor stretch where we're pushing our butt forward and trying to get that extension and all this stuff. And I kept doing it and it kept getting worse and worse. And I had Jordan say, stop stretching. This is not a stretching issue. It does not sound like that's what's going on. And my movement doc locally that I see here, he said the exact same thing. So I stopped and I worked with my local guy for quite some time. And the pain just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And I probably sucked that up for at least a couple of years, is my guess, on and off. Sometimes it was bad. Sometimes it was not so bad. I could manage all the things. And then the year before my surgery is when it just started going downhill. Had x-rays finally. They said, look, you've got arthritis. And they showed it to me and it was clear as day. And they just said, look, it's not going to get any better, but I don't want to do a hip replacement on you. You're too young. And I'm like, what? And so we had to go back and forth over months about this. And I had a shot. I had a guided cortisone shot into the spot. It lasted 3 days, I think, of 100% pain free. And so I went back, it came back very quickly. And the doc said, well, because it helped you very quickly like that, but for a short period of time, that tells me it is in fact arthritis and not some soft tissue problem, whatever, blah, blah, blah. I can't do anything else. Let's schedule it. So I wasn't going to wait. I was going to fight that too, because I think that just made absolutely no sense to me whatsoever. So we scheduled it. My first surgery date, I got sick. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I couldn't do it. And so then we had to reschedule for 3 months later. And yeah, last March is when I had it. And yeah, it was a piece of cake. I think the easiest thing I've ever dealt with. I can't even tell you how easy this was for me. And I attribute all of it, every last bit of it, to everything I did prior to that. You know, Jordan and I met and talked about my programming, and for a solid year, I did nothing but single leg exercises. I mean, he may have thrown one or two random other exercises in there, but essentially, I trained single leg. I started with no weight on any of them, even though I could move some weight. Started with no weight, and I focused on learning to control my body, getting stability back, and slowly added weight. So by the end, to surgery, I was moving some pretty decent weight, but it felt awful.
Mhm.
You know, it felt awful, but I had gained a ton of strength.
So is this a function of the strength of your nervous system, the quality of the blood flow and the vascularization of the tissue, your own metabolic health?
Yeah. Yeah.
You're pretty lean, so it's not like you have a lot of like
Yeah.
excess body fat, all these things.
Yep.
You're not walking around on a lot of extra weight. So all of these things made the recovery better
Yeah.
than what someone would have. Because I guess you're such an outlier on the bell curve for your age in
Yes.
terms of mobility, strength, metabolic health. So your, I guess, results would have been very atypical compared to, based on your digging into this, what would the experience be like for someone who is probably now the average for age for metabolic health?
I mean, I think someone can still have some really great results with this. Um, I feel like movement is just king with this. Movement and working strength. However, that is within your ability, and where you are on the scheme of experience with lifting, even or whatever. But movement is the answer, because sitting around waiting for your surgery dates to happen is going to make everything a whole lot worse. And I think every doctor on the planet would say that. So I think yeah, I was pretty active beforehand. Absolutely. But I worked my ass off. I made a conscious decision that I was going to do this no matter how much it sucked. And it did. Some days a lot. But I knew I had, if I wanted my recovery to be what I wanted it to be on the other side, I needed to do what I did. And so I feel like anybody can put in the work at wherever, whatever level you're at. You know, maybe someone's not as advanced of a lifter as me, even though I don't really consider myself an advanced lifter, but whatever. I get it. It's all about movement and finding what you can do in the time you have between when they tell you you're going to have surgery and your surgery date. You know, anything's going to help. Anything's going to help. And this is also to say that a hip surgery is a lot different than a knee surgery, too. So anybody that has knee replacement, that's kind of a different ball game. Hips, most people recover really well with hips just generally, but the more that you can move and strengthen beforehand, you're just going to be ahead of the curve.
What about the rehab process? What were the key parts of it?
Um, so they bring somebody to your house like the first 2 weeks supposedly, and you're not supposed to really do anything except you're in bed and you drag your heels on the bed. And I started just doing that, and I'm like, what else can I do? I'm not going to sit here and do this for 2 weeks. And so they got me up and had me do partial squats on day three. You know, literally, I'm holding my drawer. I opened a drawer, my chest of drawers. I'm holding onto that, or I'm holding onto the sink, wherever I was. And I am literally doing a partial squat, a little bitty squat. You know, I'm starting to get, greasing the groove a little bit. They didn't want me to go, but to so low, and that wasn't very low at all. I started increasing my range of motion because it just everything felt normal to me. So little bit by little bit, I increased range of motion. They had me go up and down steps multiple times a day. And everyone's like, "How do you go up steps with a new hip?" And I don't think people understand the new hip really doesn't do much work when you go up and down steps at the beginning. They have the other side do it, but they have you get used to the motion again, but it's not bearing the weight of going up or down the steps. So I did a lot of that. I went outside and walked on my walker. I used a walker for 4 or 5 days, and then I went to a cane, and then I wasn't using anything. They just get you up and move so fast. Um, it's actually pretty incredible if you think. And I saw just recently kind of what they do during a hip replacement surgery, and I'm like, I'm glad I didn't know that at the time because it was not really fun to watch. And the saw and the things that they're cutting and all of, no, I don't need to know all that. But it was eye-opening to think that I just went through that and I'm walking and nothing hurt. I never had any pain. My leg felt like it weighed 5,000 pounds because of probably all the inflammation and fluid retention and all the rest, but nothing ever really hurt. And I'm able to move and whatever they told me to do, I did. And they gave me a list of things to do multiple times a day, 3, 4, 5 times a day. I'm doing it. I'm setting my clock. I'm doing it. And in between, I'm probably taking a nap at the beginning because I was just so fatigued from all the anesthesia and all of that. And then I started going to rehab. And they gave me stuff. They had me doing single leg RDLs right away. And, I'm not doing granted, I'm not doing a full range single leg RDL. I'm holding on for dear life too at the beginning, but I started that movement. And that to this day is the exercise that's still not the same as my left side. I'm still trying to work on stability with that one. But yeah, I just go to rehab 2 times a week. And then I kind of knew what to do from there. I went for about a month and then I've been doing it myself.
How long before you're back to regular strength training with your hip?
That's a great question. Probably I was back at the gym on day 12 and I went back to the gym just because I needed to get into the environment again. So literally I just walking around and doing my rehab stuff, and that led to, squats and stuff. So I'm thinking, I don't know, maybe a couple months before I'm back to training upper body. I could start training a little bit sooner, but even then I found it very uncomfortable to carry a pair of dumbbells over
Mhm.
to a bench and sit down on that bench. There's
Mm.
no way. There's no way. I tried that once. I'm like, I ain't doing this again. So I changed my upper body to all machines.
Mm.
So it was super easy to get in and out of. I didn't have to worry about sitting low, carrying weight, any of that. I didn't have to worry about any of that. So maybe month 3 or 4, I was able to. I have a film, and I remember sending it to Jordan of my very first back squat with just the bar. Um, and I hadn't had a bar in my back in over a year and a half, 2 years maybe, because I just stopped doing back squats and started focusing on single leg and all that. Um, I'll have to look back on the date of that photo or that video when that was, but that was pretty much it. I started with a goblet squat right before that to a really light goblet squat.
What you said about the machines is practical. Anybody listening, whether or not you're dealing with something like a joint replacement, if you are dealing with any injured limb, I actually have a resource. It's on my website as an article, and it goes into not only the programming, but also the research behind training with an injured limb and how training the contralateral limb helps spare the muscle loss, the thickness, strength of the injured limb. Now, if you're dealing with something, as axial as your hip, that it's not as straightforward as just going back on day one after major surgery and upper body work. But what you said is actually a relevant thing is machines are going to be really helpful because sometimes it's not as simple as picking up dumbbells and walking them across if you have a broken leg, broken hip, etc.,
Yeah,
or a
yeah.
replacement. So I have a resource that can help anybody with any sort of thing there. Message me, DM me on Instagram, please. I'll send
And
it to you.
when I first start after I was on machines for a while, and I said, let me try some dumbbells now. Let me see how I feel about carrying them and then sitting on a bench because a lot of times benches are a little lower, so you have to sit a little farther. So I'm actually essentially doing a type of squat, and I hadn't really thought of it that way until I'm in the moment going, whoa, I have to stabilize this. All I'm doing is sitting down, getting ready to do something. So it changed how I thought about everything. But yeah, I was back very lightweight, of course, or no weight at all in a lot of cases. But again, attributing that just to the work put in ahead of time, I think it just made all the difference. My surgeon was just like, he couldn't believe it. He goes, "You're like light years ahead of everybody." And I had told him what I had done prior to that. Um, and he said, "That's probably the best thing that you could have done." So I would encourage anybody, if you're scheduled for something like a hip replacement, man, put in whatever work you can ahead of time, whatever that is. Maybe it's just walking. That's cool because that's the number one thing they recommend in rehab. The best thing you can do is to walk. And I don't like to walk. I put that out there. I am not a walker, but I became one shortly after that. I mean,
I think it's a testament just the dedication of strength, metabolic health, mobility as a lifestyle anyway. And it's
yeah,
not even so much about the person who may be staring down the possibility, maybe there is arthritis or, some sort of major injury that you think later in life you're going to end up with a replacement, but proactively everybody putting yourself in the position that should this happen, and I know lots of people who are younger than you who've had, I mean, Lee Boyce, my friend Andy McCloy, Robert Linkle, they're all much younger and they've had lower body major
yeah,
replacements, right?
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
so this is related quote, and this is, I believe it's a Peter Attia quote that you used on your social media recently. Once you hit the age of 65 and you fall, which is pretty likely, I mean, shit, I fell on my stairs a year ago and hurt my knee, and I'm
Oh,
46, right? And you break your femur or hip, there's a 15 to 30% chance you will be dead within the next 12 months.
yeah.
How can people reduce that risk?
And is that scary to hear or
That's
what?
terrifying. Yep.
And somebody saw that and they wrote to me and they said they had even heard the percentage was higher than that. I'm like,
I've heard it
oh,
higher.
I
Yep.
mean, so the percentage can be whatever, but the whole point of that is, yeah, I mean, and it's not always just because of the break or whatever it is. It's not the break. It's what happens to you as a result of the break, the inactivity. Um, the lack of taking care of yourself, all of the things that come with
Social, the
that are
social
the bigger
isolation,
picture issues.
the social
Yeah. Oh,
isolation.
100%. Yeah. Especially if you're elderly, because I think of my mom. She fell. She didn't break anything, but she hit her head and she was never the same. Never the same after that fall. And so I've seen it. I've seen it firsthand. Everything just started drying up for her. And I feel like getting strong now, whether you're 30 years old, 40 years old, 50 years old, 60, so it doesn't matter. Just working on getting strong and keeping your mobility now will help with that. I mean, I think there's all kinds of research out there to show that, that strength training that's why it's so emphasized. We all emphasize it so much. And from my perspective, I emphasize it because I've seen what it's done for people as they age, for me as I've aged. And my goal to be able to keep doing this as I age, it's just too important. And I often put in a lot of my posts, I feel like it should be a requirement. I know we can never do that, but I feel like it should be to some degree a requirement. It's that important. I mean, there are other things that we need to add to this mix too, but it is that important for this very reason.
Okay. So how does resistance training reduce the risk? Like what's going on? Take it deeper.
Well, you're strengthening, obviously you're building and strengthening muscle mass, which is what's going to help support you should you get tripped up, whatever. And I think we lose sight of that a lot. Having strong muscles, being able to sit down into a chair, being able to stand up from a chair, going up and down steps, getting off the floor, standing up from the floor, picking up grandkids, doing all these functional activities that make our life way more functional and enjoyable as we get older. So building muscle is the key to all of this, right? And while everyone says you can't build muscle after a certain age, I don't think that is true in any way, shape, or form. We're not going to build muscle like we did in our 30s, that's for sure. I don't think we need that kind of muscle, but we do need to constantly challenge our body and get strong. And along with that, I have also found that staying on top of mobility, getting your joints a little bit of a range of motion. So when you do fall, potentially, if you're mobile and you have a little bit more range of motion in your hip, maybe you're going to catch yourself because you have that range of motion to come and stop, right? Um, which I'm hoping that's going to be for me with this new hip now, and I'm working on mobility on this hip like crazy because I want to keep being mobile as I get older. But I really feel like that's key with strength training is just increasing your mobility as well.
Yeah. Be able to absorb the shock
Yeah.
of the
Oh, yeah.
fall. And I
Yeah.
love that you grabbed onto the catching yourself because we we can even take it a step further. It's we also want to reduce the likelihood of the fall, right?
Yes.
Falls prevented or injuries avoided. And motor control
Yeah.
and balance. And balance is a function of strength and motor control.
Yeah. Yeah. Balance is another big player. Um, and, you see people trying to train balance on weird pieces of equipment and stuff, and it's just like, that's not kind of going to help you too much in real life. Standing on one foot, can you stand on one foot for 30 seconds? I mean,
Mm.
something really basic. I know Robert and I talked a little bit about this, I believe, at one point. It's something, we all can try that at home. We don't need any equipment to practice that kind of thing.
Love it. Okay. Why isn't lifting weights enough? Why does it need to be heavy weights?
Well, I- and I'll say this, um, heavy's relative to the person too, right? So what's heavy for you is not going to be, is going to be way heavy for me, vice versa, and all the rest. So it's a relative term, and I think there's a lot of different ways you can figure out what's heavy for you, but I will say that your bones need to be challenged with some resistance. They have to. Um, Walking is great. Walking does challenge your bones, but not to the extent with adding extra resistance to it. And that's something that's super, super important. We want to increase our bone density. We want to keep the bone density that we have. And so we've got to add resistance. We need to keep progressing that as much as we can over time. And it's like we also need a little impact. And this is kind of something that's at first I thought I was in a bit of a conundrum with because my surgeon said, I really don't want you doing any long runs or whatever. I'm like, great, because I don't like running. So we're good there. His point was pounding for me and a new hip. You don't want to do a lot of pounding on a new hip because you want this to last forever, right? But a little bit of high impact is also going to help with osteoporosis and increasing the strength of your bones. Your bones have to be strong for you to be able to stop yourself from falling or whatever. So for me, it's a fine line. Can I hop around a little bit? Sure, yeah, but I'm not going to run a marathon anytime soon. Maybe even go for a light jog here or there, but it's the pounding. And I've been learning a lot that I think for menopausal, postmenopausal women, this is kind of important. Maybe one day a week, you do even just a little hop in place. You don't have to like do these whole big, huge jumps and box jumps and things like that. Little jumping about in place. Just give your bones a little bit of impact. That's how they get stronger too. So it's kind of both.
And it's the elasticity of tendons.
Yeah.
Your Achilles tendon is a big part of it. So to your point about, yes, the hip is absorbing some impact. But, to me, I would think, well, if we've got weaker muscles, weaker bones, weaker tendons, and they're not used to this sort of stuff, logically speaking, I would expect that the hip would actually experience more impact over time versus if you had strong muscles, strong joints, strong bones, that would actually, take a lot of the impact over time. I
Yeah.
mean, that's logically how I would look at it.
Yeah, you and me both, and it will all of that will support the joint. All strong muscles, tendons, ligaments, all that's going to support your joint. So, yeah, I think lifting will help all of that, um, and get you stronger with all of that. And yeah, I mean, it all makes perfect sense that way. Um, but it's still interesting to find people my age bracket, my generation, whatever you want to call it, that aren't lifting. It's not part of their, it's not part of their, I don't know. I want to say that it hasn't been part of their life, For decades, they've been cardioing it all. And so they haven't lifted. The amount of people that contact me and say they're new to lifting and they're in their 60s is mind-boggling to me. Um, but I,
What
s- but I see why, because I'm one of those people. Like I'm part of that crew. I'm part of that group. I know what we grew up with. And so it's a matter of we have to let go of old stuff and open our brain and our mind up to some stuff that's maybe newer to us. I just did it 10 years before them.
what switch flipped from the conversation you've had with those people in their 60s and they're just starting? What was their impetus to change?
Some of it I don't know, but because it's usually just in a casual DM kind of thing. But for many of them, it's a health related issue. Whether it's obesity, and now, to the credit of this industry, we're talking about this more. We're talking about my population more than we were even 10 years ago, or 15, 20 years ago. And so I feel like with there being more talk about it, more examples of it, social media, more access to things. I think it's all kind of my generation is kind of like, oh, okay, I see it now. Um, and the cool part about it all is that you can still make meaningful changes, however old you are, however late you're to the party, you can still make changes. And that's the message I try to convey to everybody that I chat with is just like, look, yeah, would it have been great for all of us to do this when we were in our 20s and 30s? Oh, 100%. Yes, yes, yes. And for anybody out there that's listening right now that is in their 20s and 30s, look, this all applies to you. All of this. Because if you start doing this stuff now, even though you think 60 is so far away you can't even smell it, let me tell you something. If you start doing this stuff now, by the time you're my age, and I'm 64, by the time you're my age, you are light years ahead of me. I mean, you talk about leading the way. I mean, it's gonna be fabulous for you. So this is not only an old person conversation, it applies to youngsters too.
Do you think that younger people doing this is rubbing off on their parents? The parents be between the various media images of, I think it's Joan, right? Train with Joan is
Yeah, she's wonderful.
she's the really
Yeah,
well-known figure in that
yeah,
space. Maybe they're seeing a bit more of that.
yeah.
And maybe it's celebrities who are, incorporating fitness as they get older, whatever. And then all of a sudden the kids, their adult children are also dedicated to fitness. Do you think that has a positive influence? And is that a motivational button you would push with someone who's in their 30s and 40s to say maybe this will rub off on your folks you're worried about?
Yeah, I would definitely go down that road with somebody in that age bracket. And yes, I do think it can play a role without a doubt. All of this combined. I don't think it's one thing. I think it's going to be a lot of things combined. Setting the example, and then encouraging your parents to go on a walk with you. Start with that. We don't have to start with them putting a barbell on their back, if ever. You know what I mean? But just have them start to walk. Get used to movement, because that's kind of the baseline here is just move. Start with that, get comfortable with that, enjoy that, especially when the weather's nice. Do that with them. And it's something I regret not having done enough of with my own mom. And by the time by the time it really had sunk in, it was too late. It was too late. She was heading downhill so fast. So I that is a big regret that I didn't really put pieces of a puzzle together early enough, maybe 15 years ago, 20 years ago for her.
I feel very lucky, and at some point I'm going to write an article about this. All the gifts that my parents gave me, and they were so ahead of their time with things like cooking us cooked meals, getting us involved in every sport. They would participate in sports as well. Both of my parents are highest level swimming certifications you could possibly get. A lot of cross country skiing. My mom is a teacher, retired now,
Yeah.
and would stay after hours because there was this tiny school in northern Newfoundland, rural Newfoundland, and me and my brother would play basketball, and she would just stay around and just do some work so that us and the other guys in the team could play basketball for a couple hours after school, right? There was a lot of really cool stuff there. And Mom listens, by the way. So hi, mom. Love you. You're amazing. And but mom now is doing the last few years she's been doing a weight class. And I know she keeps her weights kind of light, but with my aunts. And I think they all do it virtually. I think they're still doing it all the time, a lot of mornings each week. So I love seeing that. And I know that they're very plugged into my media, right? And my dad got really heavily into sea kayaking when he was, I think it was very late for 40s, early 50s, and just became obsessed with it. We do sea kayaking tours, etc. You know, walking the dogs over the years has always been that. So they go for a lot of walks. So I know that they make sure that a lot of active stuff is built in their lifestyle. And part of me feels like, well, the stuff I'm doing at least keeps it forefront in their
Yeah.
minds.
I mean, I love that. Man, your mom sounds like a rock star.
Mom is cool. I was very lucky, and the older I get, the more I realize that, a lot of the things that I found probably a little bit easier in my life were probably the product of the environment that my parents created for us as kids. And again, I don't even know if they necessarily realize just how much it worked. And you get these type of people that I find just utterly insufferable who are hell bent on focusing on all of the negatives and the disadvantages people have. And I find this sort of messaging is, and I'm going to say it, it's virtue signaling. I recognize it for what it is. It's people trying to get status within a tribal ideology instead of genuinely helping people. And I've had people come to me who got away from that kind of messaging, saying that they found it incredibly disempowering, just focusing on all of the reasons and justifications why you can't, instead of focusing on here are all the tools available. We know that the playing field is not level in life. I was very fortunate in that regard, but there's no way I'm going to somehow feel shame or guilt for having those advantages, but I'm going to lean hard into it. And I'm going to try to encourage people no matter what situation they're coming from. It's a bit of a pet peeve of mine. And every once in a while, one of these people will come at me online. What changes in nutrition and training when we get older? What do we need to adjust?
Wow. That's kind of like the big question, isn't it? Um, I think nutritionally, here's what I think. So many people as they get older, um, lose touch with their nutrition from the perspective of they're young, they get married, they've got careers, then maybe they have kids, and we're eating on the fly, we're dinner's out, lunch is out, blah, 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 blah. Time's going by, we have kids, we're taking them to practice, we're grabbing, I mean, things are just going on. And we've created this perfect storm as we get older where we haven't really had a handle on our nutrition. And then all of a sudden, Mother Nature decides to say, oh, hello, I'm perimenopause or I'm menopause or even postmenopause for that matter. Because trust me, the fun keeps going. And I can attest to that. Um, and so we create this perfect storm of, oh, hormones from menopause are now kicking in. And so now we're seeing this fat gain a little bit more than maybe we would have. And sometimes it's not really gain, it's just redistributed. And our nutrition, we haven't gotten a hold of it very much. We're just surviving. And then we're not as active as we think we are. And so you start putting all of that together and you've kind of created the storm that happens in middle age to women and I'm sure to men too. But and we call it menopause and leading the years leading up to that. And then now I'm in postmenopause and have been for quite some time. And I'm discovering that it's the gift that keeps on giving to some degree. So, and by the way, it is something, and I really haven't even spoken about this, and I will in more detail later. But I've had some health issues that I've had to start looking at the last 6 months, and a lot of it is hormonally related. Which has been really fascinating for me to learn. So this time of life, it can hit you whether you're in your 40s, 50s, 60s, whatever. But I think that that's what's really happening just in general is that we are less active than we think we are. So maybe decline in muscle mass potentially, not moving our body as much. And then our nutrition, we just don't have a handle on it like we think we do. And so then we get to this part of our life and it's just, it feels like it's out of control. Um, and for some people, it may be, I hesitate to talk about this too much because there's always a special somebody out there that says, "Well, in my case, I have the da 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 da." There's always a special person that always has a special exception. But in general, what I find with most women is that we don't need to jump down a hormone road right away. Maybe if at all. What you probably need to jump down first is let's see what your nutrition looks like. Let's maybe track things 100% accurately and consistently for like 2 to 3 weeks. Let's see what happens when you actually uber focus on this and see where all the loopholes have been. What's going on? What are the areas you can improve upon? You know, um, yeah, that sucks to have to do that, but you know what? Things get harder for us as we get older. I mean, everything is harder for us as we get older. Every single thing. So this is one of them, you know? And I was talking to some lady in another group, I think an over 50s group, and she was listing all the workouts that she does, all the things. She's doing this, she's walking, da 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 da. She's got 80 pounds to lose. And she's been in a deficit for months and months and months. And she's ready to blame hormones because she hasn't lost any weight. Yet she never mentioned food once in her whole thing, you know? And I feel like women jump to this gun way too quickly. Because for most people, it's a matter of just let's get realistic, let's clean up what we're doing, and let's see what happens with that before we do anything else.
I waffle on this one where I hear language like coaches talking about balancing hormones. And
Yeah.
it's a number one, it's charlatanic language. It's
Yeah.
grifting. But I also try to pause and think, okay, there are probably, and I look for other cues because there are probably people who otherwise it's very evidence-based and they're using marketing-based language. Now, there's some people who are going to outright object to that stuff. There's some people who are going to see the nuance. And if I can tell that really what this person is ultimately doing is getting people's nutrition quality in check, more protein, more fiber, etc., and getting them to lift weights and be more active, then do I really give two shits about whether or not they use the language of hormone balancing? I don't like it, and I won't use it. It's a red flag to me, but I think it's still wise to look deeper, but it's definitely a red flag. I
Oh, to
think
me
that,
too.
yeah, I think two of the things that, from what I've seen, play the big role is as we get older, our ability to recover slows down. Our capacity to recover slows down, which does
Amen.
affect the volume and intensity of the workout. So we probably have to adjust the training based on that. And then two is rates of protein absorption change. So, if I understand it correctly, I think we actually, as we get older, we need to probably increase our protein intake.
100% we do. And the the irony with all of this is that while balancing hormones, that term is a red flag for me too. Hormones can play a factor in a lot of things. Metabolic rate. Yeah, I mean, is it going to be a huge difference maker? Probably not, but lack of estrogen affects everything. It's so protective, and until you don't have it, you don't realize how protective it can be. And I think I feel like the protein piece of this, yes, we need to be eating more protein. And the irony is that lack of estrogen can also cause digestion issues, which makes uh, eating protein harder. And that's one thing I'm struggling with myself personally. I'm living this right now. I want to increase. I'm eating adequate protein, but I want a little bit more. Yet it's hard for me to do so because my stomach can't take it anymore. And that's new for me. I used to have a cast iron stomach. I don't anymore. That's a huge change. And so it makes it very difficult. And again, yet another thing that's hard, but not necessarily a thing that we can't overcome. We just have to be able to be creative. I'm looking at different protein sources that I haven't looked at before. I'm staying away from protein powder a little bit. That tends to be a little bit harder on the stomach in general. Beefing up my portion sizes just a little bit. I'm just trying to find other ways to get more protein in than just saying, I just can't do that. Um,
What have been some of your favorite ways to get more protein?
I, the my favorite way to do it is I increase let's say that piece of chicken that's 5 ounces, I make it 6 or 7. You know, I mean, or whatever it is in grams. You know, that's it. I'm not reinventing the wheel as much as you might think. I'm taking what I'm already doing and adding a teeny bit more to it. You know, that's the easiest way to increase protein. I'm trying to find things that have protein in them. Not a lot, but you know, you can buy some wraps or grain or bagels or whatever that have 10 grams of protein in them. I'm trying to look at those a little bit more. Not that I eat a ton of those, but because every little bit for someone my frame is everything's going to help me. You know, every little bit that I can find is going to help. But in general, eating a little bit more in portion size of what I'm already doing is what I like to do. It's the easiest thing to do, and um, I don't feel like I need to reinvent the wheel with this. Um, I'm just eating the foods that I've been eating for years that have worked for me over time that I like, that I enjoy. You know, so I'm just kind of sticking with that. And I think people overlook how really, and I want easy it is to get 100 grams of protein if you just prioritize it. And that's what a lot of people don't do. They say I can't get 100 grams of protein. I'm like, well, you're not even sitting down and trying to figure out, okay, how am I going to get my protein for 3 meals a day? How am I going to do this? You're winging it from meal to meal and hoping that by the end of the day all the numbers match up instead of sitting down today and plan out your nutrition for tomorrow. Build all your meals around protein because that's how you're going to do it, right? And once you do that a couple times, you start figuring all this stuff out and it becomes way, way, way easier. But it's prioritizing it, making protein your priority, and then giving yourself a bare minimum. Set the bar as a minimum and you hit that bar or you go higher. You know, that's what I'm trying to do.
What are your thoughts on things like Greek yogurt, low-fat cottage cheese,
Yeah.
chia seeds, all these
I,
sort of things?
I do. I
Here,
do all of that. I do basil seeds right now because I have just so many of them. I need to get rid of them. So I'm doing the basil seed thing. That's actually that's killing a couple birds with one stone here too. It's helping digestion. It's helping with fiber intake. All of that. So, and I'm new to that. I'm not a fan of them. I'll be really honest. I don't like the texture. But I'm doing it, you know? I'm doing it because I know that it's been benefiting me, you know? Um, I'm a big Greek yogurt person. I've been away from cottage cheese. Somebody reminded me of it yesterday. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? I need to bring that back into a rotation. I love ground turkey. I do a lot of ground turkey. In the middle of the day, I'll cook a bunch of that up. I like to cook a bunch of chicken up and literally prep protein and then just have options. You know, then you can play with your options. But prepping protein is another way of prioritizing it and having it ready. But Greek
one,
yogurt, cottage cheese, the best.
I cannot do the texture of cottage cheese. Holy shit. I'm
Yeah.
Canadian and I think poutine is one of the most disgusting
So
things ever.
what is poutine?
It's gross. It's this French Canadian concoction that got super popular. And I'm going to be uncharitable. It's soggy fries drowned in gravy, which I also think is awful. Like, there are going to be people mad at me hearing this. And then, like, gobs of cheese curds. Again, gross. So,
Sounds
that's just,
heavy.
it is heavy. Anyway, I think it's revolting, but a lot of people love it. It's a very high calorie food. So, to each their own. It's probably one of the reasons why I can stay lean is because I don't gravitate towards things like that.
Yeah.
Uh, shoot, I was gonna say, crap, the cottage cheese. Oh, eggs. We get stuck in this idea that eggs are for breakfast. Sometimes I will take 4 eggs, scramble them on the stove. It doesn't take very long. It's super easy. In the evening, let's say if I don't have a meal prepped otherwise, I'm a big fan of eggs. And sometimes it's
Yeah.
just the functional fixedness of thinking, wait a minute, like I can have those. And yes, I know that right now there's a whole bunch of stuff about eggs being more expensive, especially in the US, complicated geopolitical stuff. Not even going to go there, but I still find that eggs are really convenient and obviously they're very nutritious.
Yeah, I just had eggs at lunch today, actually. And I'll do like 2 eggs and I'll add a bunch of liquid egg whites. And
Mm.
I threw it in the pan with spinach. I had some ground turkey I added to that. Did that in a Dave's bagel that had 12 grams of protein in or something like that. So I mean, I'm proteining my way through the day. This is pretty typical. of what I eat during the middle of the day. But yeah, I feel like lots of ways to get protein. It just I don't think people prioritize it enough.
I like to start every meal with a base of protein. And I think if you go in with that attitude, I mean,
Yeah,
again, growing up like having like craft dinner for lunch on occasion, guess what? Craft dinner is great stuff, but maybe it means, and I'm going to say this almost in a black and white sort of sense, no more meals that aren't based on protein, right?
yeah.
Like make sure that some source of protein, whatever you like, lots of options, is the foundation of all of your meals. Okay.
I think that is absolute truth. Yeah. You have to build your meals around protein.
Everybody can follow you at Susan Niebergall Fitness on
Yep.
Instagram. Any other resources you want to direct people to?
YouTube, Susan Niebergall Fitness, have a lot of resources there. My book, Fit at Any Age is Never Too Late. Just a story, my story, basically, of changing the trajectory of my life, essentially, in my 50s, from a physical standpoint, mental and career, everything, and how I did it. Yeah, and I have a podcast as well, the Strong and Lean at Any Age podcast, and I've taken a hiatus from it because I've been dealing with these health issues, but it's coming back. I'm about ready to hit it back now. So
I needed a hiatus for the podcast to sort out the direction of it. And so I think it's probably about the last, I don't know if it's certainly more than 10 episodes where I've had, again, Jordan Syatt's been back, Dr. Mike Israetel's been on, and conversations for the end user. But before that, you've been on a guest on, I think it's at least twice, and someone's got to do a bit of scrolling. But if they're interested in more of the career side of your story, I've had you on. We've actually talked a
yeah,
lot about that. So there is some great
yeah,
stuff back there, guys. Go back if you want to dig into more Susan's stuff. If you
I've had a
found
lot
this
of great
episode,
guests.
been very lucky. In my travels, I've had a lot of incredible people in my world. So, and the plan is going forward, I will continue to have industry leaders. I will definitely be bringing Robert Linkle on in I would say the first half of 2025. He's incredible. So look out for that, guys. But if you're finding this episode first time through Susan's media, I would love to have you stick around. Obviously, Jordan's site was recent. I know if you're a fan of Susan's, you're probably locked in on Jordan as well. Check out the other episodes, and I would love to have you. And I would love to hear your feedback. Please shoot me a message on Instagram. I'm easy to get a hold of. I respond to everything, and I want to hear what you think so far. And who knows, maybe you can even, I've got a long list of people already lined up, but you can also ask me. And one of the reasons I was able to get Jordan, because Jordan had said, quite a while ago, he was doing 4 or 5 podcasts a day for what seemed like a few years, and he just cut it off, and he's politely just kind of focused on his family. But I put up a poll, and some people had tagged Jordan in it on Instagram. And so he responded to me right away. He's like, yeah, man, absolutely. I'll come on for you. So I was lucky to get him back. So, guys, go check that
Absolutely.
out. Message me. Go support Susan. Go follow her if you aren't already. And stay tuned for next week.